I go to the member for Capalaba for the next question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Attorney-General. Attorney, on page 27 of the budget paper 4 notes that the funding for the Victim Liaison Service is being provided to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions as part of a $25 million package to enhance service delivery and bolster support for victims of crime. Could you elaborate on what budget measure is about? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I do want to thank the member for Capalaba for the question, because unlike the Leader of the Opposition, who couldn't even mention victims of crime in his budget and reply speech, I know there is, like I said before, no greater advocate, and I'm quite sure had that been bolstered, the member for Capalaba would have loved to have had that support of that Victim Liaison Service through the DPP, going through the matters that have been well articulated in this parliament. But, Mr Speaker, it was lovely, actually, the other day. I was just up in Cairns and I got to meet 2 of the victim liaison officers at the Cairns DPP. So I do want to thank the Cairns DPP for welcoming me so nicely when I visited. It was great. I met these 2 young women who, well, actually, I hope one of them's listening because she's probably about my age and she would laugh if she thought, like me, called young, but she's worked in the system for a long time in the Department of Justice, like I'm finding across the state. So many people spend a great deal of their working life working for the Department of Justice. But I met those 2 victim liaison officers at the Cairns DPP office and you know, they remarked the role is extremely challenging, but extremely rewarding. So that extra funding that the member talks about to those victim liaison officers was one of the first announcements that we did, because we understand, and no one greater than the member, understand the issues that you're confronted with, delays in the justice system, problems with getting your matter heard, to have that victim liaison. And I'll also note it does help them navigate the justice system. But when I came to government, this victim liaison service was facing a huge funding cliff by the former Labor government. In fact, because of the former Labor government and how they left the budget in the absolute dire strait that it was, in fact, 18 FTEs were set to lose their jobs if those guys had got in again, if you can even believe that. Their jobs, they would have lost them on the 30th of June if we had not stepped in and funded that victim liaison service. A much needed service, I would suggest to you. A government that is focused on victims, a government that is focused on faster access for justice, a government that is ensuring that we can put the building blocks back in place so the justice system can be restored in this place. 18 frontline staff who under the former Labor government would not have been able to support vulnerable victims of crime. We've taken the decision to reprioritise and make sure that that victim liaison service remains on foot. Victims are a priority for our government, and the funding cliff that this vital service shows, that we're faced with, shows the clear difference between the way the Crisafulli government treats victims and how victims, and I mean, of course I've been talking about the DNA debacle, but victims were treated, not just in the DNA debacle, but the victims were treated by the former government. They didn't even bother having extended funding for the Victims Liaison Service. It actually would take your breath away. And I will note that those hard-working Victim Liaison Services, people in those roles, were also explaining if they are overworked with the amount of victims that they're now trying to assist, there's a hotline that they can call as well, and they said that that was very helpful. Mr Speaker.
Member for Capalaba, you have a question?
Thank you. My question is also for the Attorney-General. In relation to page 24 of budget paper number 4, can you explain the agreement Queensland has with the Commonwealth to fund the legal assistance sector, including how much the Commonwealth funding Queensland receives?
Oh, member, thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank you so much for the question. And talk about coming in as a new minister and getting briefed about funding cliffs. I I tell this story. I've been to the conference. I talk about this all the time because I still cannot believe it. I actually cannot believe it. And thank goodness the Crisafulli government came to government at the end of last year, because it gives, what this question goes to the heart of is talking about the National Access to Justice Partnership and the incredibly important role that the legal assistance sector plays in our justice system here in Queensland. So I'm so proud of this funding uplift that our government delivered for the legal assistance sector, particularly because of what it's meant for the sector, what it's meant for victims, what it's meant for that end of the sector that just do such hard grunt work. But I want to put a little bit of context in here first, because for the three people that are probably listening online to this estimates, and I know one of them's not my daughter Lucy because she just tried to call me. They have a habit of doing that. I'll have to tell them about Parliament. But anyhow, I want to get to that because one of the first briefings I had was about this issue. And one of the terms of the National Access to Justice partnership negotiations that the former government signed Queensland up for, one of the terms of that agreement was that the state of Queensland must maintain the current level of effort and investment in real terms over the life of the agreement, including any specific subsector. The problem for Queensland was that the former government didn't keep up to that agreement. They didn't maintain that current funding. In fact, I had to immediately pick up the phone for me to go to my first SCAG, to the first Standing Council of Attorneys General, ensure that we could unlock the $800 million of federal government funding. For us to do that, we needed to find an extra $142 million immediately. So one of my first calls, I think I had a few more than this, but a few, to the Premier was to say, you will not believe what the former government have done. Talk about budget black holes. So to the people that require the most amount of assistance in the legal sector, the former Labor government just didn't fund for it. So I had to go call the Premier. We had to have an urgent CBRC meeting with the Treasurer of the Premier to talk about the importance of community legal centres, legal aid services, domestic and family violence legal services. All of those people are already stretched. And for the former government to be so out of touch and forget that that end of the sector, who are, even with this funding, I can tell you, Mr Speaker, they'll still say they're chronically underfunded, which is what happens in that sector. But no, from the Crisafulli government, we value them. We ensured that that funding was secured so we could reach that agreement. Now, I've travelled across the state. I've spoken with many community legal centres. I've spoken with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services, legal officers. I've heard from them directly that the frontline workers, what this funding certainty has meant for them. I shared a few of those stories when I spoke at this year's Community Legal Centres Conference. But Mr Speaker, importantly, it has meant that these vitally important services from across our state who are already stretched, it means they can plan services, they can reach more vulnerable clients, they can offer employment certainty for their workers. And this is the certainty that they needed, but they just didn't get it from the former Labor government. So, Mr Speaker, we will never shy away from our responsibility to ensure essential legal services have support, the resources and, importantly, the funding they need to operate and help those vulnerable Queenslanders.
Members, I think the member for Capella had a question.
Yes, thank you. Attorney, could you please give us some more information on what has been found by Dr Budowle in his review report, which you have tabled today, and the recommendations he has made?
Call the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm really pleased to talk to this because the Dr Bruce Budowle's report makes for damning reading. It's shocking, but thankfully it provides some solid recommendations for us to go forward. The key observation of the Budowle report is that despite efforts since the Commission of Inquiry, FSQ remains an organisation in a state of sustained crisis. FSQ's challenges lie over multiple of areas: leadership, organisational, foundational systemic failures in quality assurance and operational capacity and capability. Now, the demands on FSQ just simply haven't been listened to by the former government, and that's why we're getting to work. Now, the report does a call to action in which it explained the transformation that's needed. Now, the conclusions of the Budowle report reiterate that FSQ remains in crisis. FSQ continues to attempt to rebuild itself, implement recommendations of the COIs, deal with backlogs, but it's not adequately prepared or resourced to address the extensive problems, hence why the Crisafulli government has had to step in with that extra resourcing. Now, current frameworks to implement change will be happening. One of the main recommendations by Dr. Bruce Budowle was to appoint that independent advisor, and that's exactly what we've done. The second recommendation is that management and staff should proactively seek and implement alternative, pragmatic and viable solutions to enable a more expeditious and effective implementation of those operations. Make no mistake, the report is damning. Dr. Budowle has done a huge volume of work to outline major crises at FSQ. The Crisafulli government is stepping in to fix it, where the Labor opposition are still pretending that nothing is happening.